I'm Mark Payne with the West Virginia Humanities Council. Welcome to History Alive. History Alive is a program of the Council that brings historical figures to life through first-person portrayals by presenters who have conducted thorough research into their character. The Humanities Council makes these characters available to both nonprofit and for-profit organizations across West Virginia. History Live is designed as an interactive experience between the character and the audience. They are entertaining and educational. We encourage your organization, school, or event to host a presentation and bring a figure from history for a visit with your audience or students. Having someone like Harriet Tubman or Stonewall Jackson come to speak to your group can breathe life into these historical figures. Nothing compares to the live in-person visit. Each presentation consists of 3 parts: a monologue, a question-answer session with the character, and then the presenter breaks character to answer questions about how he or she conducted their research. Our History Live presenters have researched a variety of sources such as diaries, journals, letters, official documents, autobiographies, and the research of other scholars in developing their character. A History Live presentation is not a play. It is an audience participation event that relies on interaction between the audience and the character. Being able to ask your own questions of these important figures from the past is a unique experience. It's difficult to reproduce the feel of an actual History Live presentation here in the studio. Without an audience to ask questions, we'll change the format a little bit and have our guests sit with me for a few questions after the monologue. But we hope to give a sample of how a History Live presentation can add to your program offerings. There will be information on the end of the screen, or at the end of the program on the screen, for how you can contact the Humanities Council about bringing a History Live character to your community. At this time, I would like to welcome today's guest from history. We are pleased to have with us in the studio President Theodore Roosevelt.
Delighted. Ladies and gentlemen of the great city of Charleston, my hat is in the ring. The fight is on, and I'm stripped to the butt. Now I don't want you good folks thinking I've become one of those nudists. The sort that goes around coatless, shirtless, and wears trousers to match. I simply stand before you wearing the naked political truth. For the first time in the history of our great nation, 2 new words have been added to the vocabulary: direct primary. Do you know what that means, my friends? It means I can now come and stand before you instead of standing in front of those political machine bosses of the Republican Party. It means instead of merely choosing between candidates about whose nomination you have nothing to say, you can now decide who your candidate for the presidency will be. It means you now have the power to break the mold of the political machine. And you can only keep that power by voting for the man with the right ticket. That's the thing that gets you, the people, to the center of political power, which is rightfully yours. I have your ticket to victory. It is my record. That's right, I'm running on my record. If you can find a better run, I'll run on it. But you can't. Just look it over. Remember the action I took to settle the paralyzing anthracite coal strike of 1902? The arrogant mine owners were brought to heel with strong executive action. I simply told them to deal with the miners in good fashion. It was the first time that a president stepped in a dispute between management and labor, and under threat of federal takeover of the mines, by Godfrey, we got the matter settled. Do you remember how the big corporations tried to kill the bill providing for the Bureau of Corporations? Why, those plutocrats sent letters and telegrams to influence various senators and congressmen. Do you remember how I got a hold of 1 or 2 of those letters and promptly gave them to the newspaper? Well, as often happens, the men who were all powerful as long as they could work in secret became powerless as soon as they were forced out into the open. and the bill went through. I tell you, my friends, if any harm comes from having the light turned on, those corporation rascals have got to remember that it's not really due to the light, but to the misconduct it exposes. Taft is a mollycoddler who kowtows to the machine politicians and the power brokers. I offer you a simple yet powerful program. Fair play. Human rights above property rights. When I plead the case of the crippled brakeman on the railroad, of the overworked girl in a factory, of the stunted child toiling in human labor, of the family dwelling in the squalor of a noisy tenement, of the worn-out farmer working lands that are also worn out. I am not only fighting for the weak, I am also fighting for the strong. The sons of all of us will pay in future if we in the present do not do justice in the present. If the fathers cause others to eat bitter bread, the teeth of their own sons shall be set on edge. I offer you a ticket to a new era, the era of the square deal. As a sickly, delicate boy, suffering much from asthma, I could only dream of the great adventures that lie before me. My first interest in life was natural science, and as a youth I wrote natural histories of the animals and insects I collected. My father told me when I was a youth, "You have the mind, but not the body, so you must make your body." I then began working out in the gym my father had installed for me at our home. One time I even took boxing lessons. My first boxing master was John Long, the next prize fighter. I can see his rooms now, with colored pictures of the fights of Tommy Heyer, Yankee Sullivan, and other great events in the annals of the squared circle. On one occasion, to excite interest among his patrons, he held a series of championship matches. I entered, never thinking I could win. He had these championship matches for the different weight classes. The prize, a pewter mug, probably costing 50 cents. Neither he nor I had any idea I could do anything in such a competition. I was pitted in succession against a couple of reedy striplings who were even worse off than I was. To their surprise, and to my own, and to John Long, I won, and the pewter mug became one of my most prized possessions. Oh, I studied judo, taught myself to ride and shoot, and various forms of exercise. But I rarely took exercise merely as exercise. Primarily, I took it because I liked it. I wanted to grow up and be like my father, the greatest man I've ever known, and to make him proud of me. Even though we were well off, my father, from the earliest days, instilled into me the knowledge that I was to work and to make my own way in the world. He made it possible for me to study natural science by making me understand the sacrifices I would need to make. I entered Harvard University at the age of 18. The lessons I learned at Harvard were lessons I have used all my life. Her name was Alice Hathaway Lee, and I loved her the first time I saw her across the crowded room. I told my friends I was with that someday she would be my wife. It took me 2 years of pursuit before she finally said yes. After we married, we spent 3 years of happiness, such as rarely comes to man or woman. On February 12th, 1883, our daughter Alice was born. And on February 14th, my wife died in my arms. I lost my beloved wife and darling mother on the same day. There was nothing left for me except to try to so live as not to dishonor the memories of those I loved who had gone before me. To escape the pain of loss, I went west. It was still the old West in those days, the far West, the West of Owen Wister's stories and Frederick Remington's drawings, the West of the Indians and the buffalo hunter, the soldier and the cowpuncher. I do not believe there was any life more attractive to a vigorous young fellow than life on a cattle ranch in those days. It was a fine, healthy life, too. It taught a man self-reliance, hardihood, and the value of instant decision. But mind you, there were many times in later life that I was criticized for this trait. In short, the virtues that ought to come from life in the open country. I enjoyed this life to the fullest. In those days, on a cow ranch, the men were apt to be away on various roundups at least half the time. It was interesting and exciting work, and except for a lack of sleep on the spring and summer roundups, it was not exhausting work. Or compared to lumbering or mining or blacksmithing, to sit in the saddle is an easy form of labor. I owe more to the Old West than I could ever express. The Old West made me well again, made me whole, so that I could come back and fall in love with Edith. We've had a bully life together, just bully. I believe most earnestly and sincerely in peace. A good soldier hates war, but hates injustice and aggression more. It is an abhorrent thing to make a wanton or unjust war. Friends, I don't believe in going to war at all if you can help it. But if you go to war, go to war. I don't believe in a man brawling with another man. I'll never like to see another man hit another man. But if you have good reason to hit another man, don't just hit him, put him to sleep. I have been vice president and know how hollow the honor is. On September 6, 1901, President McKinley was shot by an anarchist in the city of Buffalo, New York. I had once announced that I would continue, unchanged, McKinley's policies for the honor and prosperity of the country, and I asked all the members of his cabinet to stay. I was not primarily concerned with either following or not following in his footsteps, but in facing new problems that arose. Among the most important of these problems is the protection of our natural resources. The preservation of our forests is an imperative business necessity. We have come to see clearly that whatever destroys the forest, except to make way for agriculture, threatens our well-being. The forest reserve should be set apart forever for the use and benefit of our people as a whole, and not sacrificed to the short-sighted greed of a few. There can be nothing in the world more beautiful than the Yosemite, the groves of the giant sequoias and redwoods, the canyon of the Yellowstone, the Three Tetons. And our people should see to it they are prepared for their children and children's children forever, with their majestic beauty all unmarred. The United States at this moment occupies a lamentable position as being perhaps the chief offender among civilized nations in permitting the destruction and pollution of nature. Our whole modern civilization is at fault in the matter, but we in America are probably most at fault. We treasure pictures and sculptures and cathedrals. But we are, as a whole, still in that low state of civilization where we do not understand that it is also vandalism to wantonly destroy or permit the destruction of what is beautiful in nature, whether it be a cliff, a forest, a species of mammal or bird. Here in the United States, we turn our rivers and streams into sewers and dumping grounds. We pollute the air. We destroy forests and exterminate fishes, birds, and mammals, not to speak of vulgarizing charming landscapes with hideous advertisements. 6 weeks ago, I spoke to the honest representatives of a convention that was not dominated by honest men. The fight in Chicago was no ordinary party quarrel. It was a naked issue of right and wrong. It is definitely a case of political theft at every form, from highway robbery to petty larceny, stealing from the plain men and women who make up the bulk of the Republican Party. The party regulars have stolen my nomination. The party of the ways has come. They have forced us to form a new party, the Progressive Party of America. What happens to me is of little consequence. I am to be used, as in any doubtful battle, any man is used, to his hurt or not, as long as he is useful, and is then cast aside or left to die. To you who grid yourselves for this great new fight in the never-ending warfare for the good of humanity, remember, we fight in honorable fashion for the good of mankind, fearless of the future, unheeding of our individual fates. With unflinching hearts and undimmed eyes, we stand at Armageddon and we battle for the Lord.
I'm here with President Theodore Roosevelt. Mr. President, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for taking time out of your schedule and being with us today.
Delighted.
Mr. President, I'd like to start by asking you if you would speak a little bit about your relationship with your father. I know he was important to you.
He was probably the greatest man I've ever known. He did a lot of things for people. He helped fund the YMCA in New York. He started the Newspaper Boys Home. And during the Civil War, he actually set it up where soldiers could send money home. He's the one that got behind that movement so that the money that were paid, instead of going to them on the battlefield, would be sent home to their families to take care of their families.
Mm-hmm. Now, he died as a young man, did he?
Yes. I was actually just 20 when he died, so I had never had any experience. I remember my father as I was when I was a young boy. I don't have any recollection of him being any man-to-man conversations or anything. Mm-hmm. So what he taught me as a boy is what I know.
Well, you're certainly no stranger to the feelings of grief and loss with the loss of your mother and your wife on the same day, which was very difficult. And I don't think I'll be misspeaking to say that as a result of that, did that lead you to heading out west to the Badlands and you're sort of launching into your experience as a rancher?
I would think in my mind was I wanted to get away, escape, and the Badlands was just something I always wanted to do. And I had been hunting in that area before. It was a place I knew. It was a place I felt comfortable with. I knew several men there. I had already started to ranch, tried to do ranching out in that area. So I was familiar with that area, and it was just a way to get away from everything.
So you actually were ranching before?
Yeah, started ranching, working out there.
What were your experiences as a rancher? I mean, were you successful?
Well, I had a marvelous time. Unfortunately, the cattle died one time through a drought. We went through a tremendous drought, and then the next year was lots of snow and frozen, and what remained of my herds froze on the ground.
A lot has been said about your literary expertise and your writing, and I know you've authored many books.
Yeah, about approximately 30, I believe.
And that you're a voracious reader.
No, yes, read books constantly, eating dinner, even would be at a state of fair or something, I would still be reading as we're there, because I just enjoy reading.
What about your writing, I guess, which early on, you wrote a lot of, you mentioned in your monologue that you wrote a lot of sort of natural history.
Right, yeah, even as a child. Yeah.
Was there any of your works that you were particularly proud of?
Well, the War of 1812, the history of the naval battles of the War of 1812 was probably the big, at one time it was actually highly thought of and used as the authority on the War of 1812.
And you were a young man when you wrote it.
I was a young man, yes. I was in the legislature in New York. So.
Well, this is not actually President Theodore Roosevelt that I'm speaking with. This is actually Gene Worthington
Good afternoon.
Of Fayetteville, and I appreciate you being here with us, Gene, again. And you're certainly one of our experienced History Live presenters, having done multiple characters for us in the past. And so I'll ask you what I think I usually ask of everyone is, what was it about Theodore Roosevelt? What was it about Teddy? And I think he hated to be called Teddy, but...
oh, yeah, you just like the term Teddy.
I would have never called him that to his face.
No. Well, it's a very thing. Way back in high school, we did a play. The school I went to started a theater, a drama club. And the first play they
Arsenic
did
and Old
was Arsenic and Old Lace. and I was not a scholar as a young boy in high school. And the English teacher stopped me in the hallway and he said, "Would you like to be in the drama club?" Because he thought I would read a perfect Roosevelt. So yeah, I did that, and then I just started reading about him, and it was amazing to me that, well, the wealth of information that is out there on Teddy Roosevelt is just now and it's always a great read. And I'm always finding out different things, different views. Some of my views of him have changed over the years from different authors I've read. So it's just he's an amazing fellow.
Yeah, he seems to have one of the most incredible resumes.
Right, you can almost guarantee about one book a month.
Yeah, I mean, he was the governor of New York. He was the chief of police. He was a rancher in the Badlands. He was the vice
He was assistant secretary of the Navy. He was all this stuff. So he was,
Speaking of which, what do you think is, if someone's interested to learn or read about Theodore Roosevelt, do you have any suggested?
Well, Morris's books are good. They're very informative.
Morris.
Yeah, but there's it's hard to say because there's so many now that have come out with just centering on one aspect, like the Great White Fleet. I had read about it, knew it, but I read the book about it, and I can't tell you who the author is right now. But I realized that he
Bradley,
thought,
was it?
What may have been, I'm not sure. But I realized that was what he considered his greatest accomplishment, was the fact that he sent the Navy around the world. Because at that time, it wasn't done. Nobody had ever done it before. Our Navy did not have a great reputation. So he was able to get the Navy in line and send them around the world to show. He claims it wasn't a power thing, but evidently it was. He wanted to show the Russians and Japanese and English that we were probably the strongest country in the world.
So he believed that was one of, if not the greatest accomplishment.
Of course, then you had the Panama Canal, which he was instrumental in getting that built. Just very quickly, the rebels came in, overthrew the government in Panama, and about an hour later, Roosevelt signed a peace treaty with them and started pumping money into the canal because the world needed it. That's why. That's what he said.
Well, he, what was his phrase a man of strenuous, or he advocated for a life of
a life of strenuous endeavor.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And
not the life of ignoble ease, but the life of strenuous endeavor.
And he was born into a wealthy
family. Yeah, he was.
And lived
his father told him though that, hey, you're going to have to, if you want to do the things you want to do, you're going to have to earn your own way. Okay, from early on, that was one of the things his father instilled in him, was if he was going to study natural science, which was his love as a young boy, that he was going to have to make sacrifices in life and other things so that he'd be able to afford to do this.
And he had an amazing drive and energy bordering on sort of
maniacal almost.
Right,
Yeah,
manic,
I mean, he's just, he could have been, I've read where he was ADHD, attention deficit disorder. He couldn't stand in one spot for a few minutes, just constantly moving.
What was his sort of, I'll say obsession? I don't know if it was an obsession, but it was certainly a keen interest in military service or in soldiering.
Right. Well, there's a lot of factors that went into it. His father never served. He wanted to be like his father growing up because his father was his hero. But the one thing that bothered him his whole life was the fact that his father never served. Okay, during the Civil War, you were able to not serve by purchasing another soldier to go in your place. Okay, and there's reasons behind that. It wasn't that his father didn't want to fight, because his father was a big Union sympathizer, but his mother was a Bullock from the South, and her brothers were all fighting for the South, and she begged him not to go in because she was afraid that her brothers would be killed.
They might face one another on the battle.
Yeah, so he didn't go in for love of his wife.
So after Roosevelt came into office upon the assassination of McKinley,
right,
and then he was reelected in 1904.
Yeah, tremendous I mean, God, it was amazing how popular he was during the election. But he chose not to run the third time.
So he didn't run in 08?
No, he put William Howard Taft up to run, and Taft won with Theodore's blessings.
And after that, he obviously did want to get back into office,
right?
And that he couldn't get the nomination from the Republican Party, so he formed the Progressive.
So he formed his own party. Yeah. That was one of the first times that direct primaries were used for election, and Roosevelt won 12 of them. Okay, he had it hands down. He had the nomination in his back pocket. But all the wheeling and dealing with the politicians and different things, all of a sudden, like the governor of Indiana withdrew theirs, and then next place withdrew theirs, and he was out.
So why? I mean, why did they not support him?
A lot of things, just the fact that he was so powerful, for one thing, and they were afraid, because most of the Republicans at that time were of the wealthy class. Okay, and he spent most of his time trying to give everyone a fair break, let's say. You get equal choice. Human rights above property rights is one of his big things. And he thought that a guy who worked on the job should get paid a living wage for it. He thought that women should be able to work and get paid a living wage for it. He thought that women should vote. He thought that the corruption in the politicians was such that they should be able to be recalled, even judges. So he was against a lot of things that the Republican Party at that time stood for.
He was a very progressive president, I think, in his policies.
Right,
He's been called the first modern president, I think, and those are some of the reasons why. But
and a lot of times he just used his power and just went around. He just ran an end run around it. He did what was legal, but he found a new way to do it.
Well, at this point, I want to thank you, Gene Worthington of Fayetteville, again, for being here and taking time out of your schedule. We appreciate your good work for us in the History Live program for the Humanities Council. And I'd like to thank all of you folks for tuning in to another episode of History Alive.